Hello and welcome back to Samurai Flag channel. My name is Marielle and today I am with my parents again. If you missed last video, please check it out. My parents visited Japan in 1994 for the first time. This was a trip that inspired me to move to Japan because my parents had actually been there. So that kind of brings us to the present moment. We are talking about this year when my parents came to Japan post COVID-19. So yeah, let's get started and talk about the crazy journey up until this year. So Mom and Dad, can you introduce yourselves once again?
Yes, I'm Donna.
I'm Larry.
Konnichiwa.
So for anyone who is new here, my name is Marielle. I'm sometimes appearing on Samurai Flag channel, and I also have my own channel called On the World Stage. And I have lived in Japan for 4 years, and I was actually here during the entirety of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I want to talk about first, from my perspective, what happened, and then I will give it to my parents to give their side. So first, I'll talk about it. I moved to Japan in 2019 to be an English teacher, and after about 7 months as an English teacher, I was actually planning to leave Japan, and I was going to relocate to France, where I was going to be an au pair for a family in France. So this was all very planned out. And yeah, I want to talk about this moment with my parents because I know my side of it.
And we talked about whether you should come home or you might be forced to stay, but it could be for months or even, we said, years or a year. It seemed hard to believe it would be a year, but that it could shut down. So we had thought about it and we were not, we were worried about it because you hadn't been away that long. You were fresh out of school really, and you didn't speak Japanese at that point.
And part of me listening to you, I remember having that discussion with you on, FaceTime and whatnot, and what should you do? And even though I wanted you home so badly, I really did, I realized it might be best for you to let you make your decision and, ultimately you.
Which is why we also said we were fine with it in the end, that we worried about it. But yeah, at this point, there were no vaccines. We live in a suburb of New York, of course, but New York City was like a horrible area. And we even knew people who had been ill and died.
Yes,
and so, it was a little bit scary. So the idea of you staying in a place that also, we had been to Japan. We knew what you felt about Japan. We knew Japan would be a nice country to be in, most likely, because it was hard to say what would happen when COVID hit and how the Japanese government would react, whether they would tell you to leave or something at some point we thought about. But the reality is, we're like, if you're going to be somewhere, it's a nice country, it's a safe country, it has a good government and hospitals and medical. So we felt a little better. If you were in certain places, and we know other people whose kids were, we would have been like, you got to get on a plane and come home. The fact that it was Japan actually played into the fact that we did not sort of try to demand that of you.
Ultimately, when I had your approval to stay in Japan, I felt such relief. I felt so grateful because I don't think it's the most common thing in the world in that situation that the parents would kind of support their child staying so far away. But so when did Japan actually open? And how soon after did you plan your trip to come see me?
I would think it was like during this past holiday season. We noticed
Japan
that
started to open, but it didn't fully.
The quarantine rules started to drop.
Initially, you had to be in a group. You could only travel as a group. They had some rules for people who were, in fact, relatives of residents, but it wasn't fully open like other countries had fully opened. By then, the United States and Europe were open. That was what I was hoping to see happen in Japan. And by the time we came in April, while there was, of course, the vaccine requirement, the other requirements, quarantines, testing had fallen away, making it a lot more assuring to us that we'd actually get to have a good trip and see you and travel. But, the idea of coming over and not being able to really travel and potentially being quarantined just is why we weren't going to
Well,
do
we
it.
didn't come any earlier.
Or being part of a tour group with a controlled environment where we didn't want that. You know, we wanted the chance to do stuff with you. So we waited.
Yeah,
till
my
open.
my parents like to travel more locally, not the biggest fan of tours. So that's why I'm the way I am too, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So we were waiting to know that
Make your own tour.
To travel with you and do what we want to do, and not and not have the trip be overshadowed by stress of worrying about things, and so that was a big part.
Or even us getting stuck because we have relatives here and grandparents here.
We have to move on to the next part. We're gonna lose time of the actual trip. So this time planning the trip, very different from 1994. There's a lot more resources on the internet. There's of course still books too. So Mom, I know that you did a lot of the planning for this trip. So how did you go about it?
Well, I did start with tour books, but also now that some of them are even online. And I made notes from there and just to get an idea, because I knew we were coming in the spring. And I knew that, why not try to see cherry blossom, if that would work out. And so I did a combination of watching YouTube videos, taking notes from them, tour books, and then kind of assembled all the information and just kind of distilled it down to what to see. And I realized actually that since we were coming mid-April, that, the cherry blossom sakura season would be a little, on the wane in Tokyo by that time. I really wanted to go north because I really wanted to experience it. And also the good thing was you hadn't been north. And some places I mentioned to you, you said you were interested in going to. I mentioned Sendai. And then I mentioned Kokunodate, and you weren't as aware of it. But
I want to talk about this. My mom kept mentioning this place called Kokunodate in Akita Prefecture. To be honest, I was very skeptical. I thought that we were going to show up to this place and there would be nothing there. I really thought my mom was misled. We had to go on this train, all the way there. And it was far. It was even cold at that time. And I was just feeling a little confused, but I decided to take a YouTube video of it. I have to say, this video became my most popular video.
Right?
Mom should be the content planner for my YouTube channel.
Yes.
But one thing about the planning also before we came to the day before we came, a huge difference is some of the things we knew, I knew about conditions and things, and is with YouTube, I could look up anything and find information about it, and I was watching videos up till the day we left of people that had just been posted within the last days, walking down the street in Tokyo, in Kyoto, showing what was going on, showing what it was like, that were actually geared towards people interested in knowing how open was Japan, what was Japan like post-COVID. So I watched a lot of videos, which helped me understand what the vibe was, and that, I was worried, would Japanese be worried about tourists or visitors? And the videos showed me that it was reopened and that people were in fact visiting. And when we got there, I knew that the minute we got off the plane in the airport and saw the huge line at customs, and just how they had so many people dealing with all the foreigners visiting and all the tourists, and they were from all over the place. We heard so many languages, but I saw that on YouTube first. You could never have done that in the past. So I had a real feel, besides talking to you, but I had a real feel. I even had watched YouTube videos that you had been in.
And
so,
here are my notes of all different YouTube videos that are entry requirements, and we had to get those UPC, different things we needed to do, different boxes we needed to check before we could even
it was very useful, and you could literally see what was going on the street in places that are popular because of all the YouTubers.
Yeah. I want to mention something about YouTube because it's part of the reason I made my own YouTube channel. Was before moving to Japan, I didn't feel scared about it. One, because you had been to Japan before and you really liked it and said great things about it. But also, as I was researching about English teaching or places to live in Japan, I chose to live in Kyoto in the Kansai area, not Tokyo at that time. And I used YouTube as my main source to kind of get a perspective what it would actually feel like to be there. So I think it's amazing. Also, okay, I want to do something. I want each of us go around and say our highlight of our trip first. Highlight of the trip. Second, I will do our favorite thing we ate on the trip. Our favorite food we ate. First, going around. For me, highlight of the trip was definitely Kokunodate, seeing those beautiful cherry blossoms along the river. It looked like something out of a Ghibli film. I'm so glad I took the YouTube video. I have a wonderful memory now. Okay, Dad, what's your highlight of the trip?
I actually think the highlight was walking around Tokyo and seeing what it was like now, and going to Asahi Beer and having a beer and looking out the window and going on the river. I really got a chance to experience Tokyo differently. It looked different, it felt different, and because I had been there, I don't know, I felt like I was absorbing more of it and getting to really look it over. So I really liked the time just roaming in Tokyo. I don't feel like we spent as much time in the past doing that, and we did more of that.
My favorite also was Kokunodate, and also for the cherry blossoms, but also for the historic samurai homes and the samurai district. Really touched me. But another thing I loved.
Okay, I knew you were gonna ship my mom loves this guy.
And learning about Date Matsumane, learning the history of samurai and the culture really was a highlight in this trip for me.
Now food, it's just say the food. Now we'll go around and say our favorite foods that we ate on this trip together. For me, it is of course the Zunda shake.
Tsukiji market, sushi breakfast.
All right, and I love that too. I really love the grilled squid and seafood that woman made on the grill in Matsushima Bay.
Yes.
Yep, buddy. I knew it. I knew he was going to say that. In 1 minute, Mom, can you just say what were the differences this time? So, Mom, what were the differences that you noticed in Japan this time?
This time I thought, well, because as you could tell, I love kawaii culture, there was more of that around, more cuteness, more like, even though many years ago in 1994, there would be maybe the Seiko clock and other images here and where, everywhere there were, especially this little guy, we went to the Snoopy Cafe. we experienced that kind of culture, and just it brings a smile to my face. And you know, just looking around, we would just say how different that is from where we are here, because I just love all the cute images, and it really does bring joy.
Okay, Dad, in 1 minute, can you talk about the difference in the conversion rate of the money?
Oh, well, I mean, I talked about that before we got there as it started to shift more recently, because it was a pretty quick shift in the last few years while you were there. I remember say like how it was getting better for us to come there when we would, because compared to when we were there last time, the dollar would buy more yen. So I knew that when we were going to get there, that unlike when we were there in 94, where it felt like, to me, when we were in 94, my friend said, think of an American $100 bill as a $10 bill. That's how bad it seemed. Also, it seemed relatively like food was more expensive then for food in Japan now than it was in 1994. When we arrived in April, it was at about a 25% discount to the former rate. It had changed by that much. So, you know, someone would say that a beer was, 400 yen. I used to think of that, oh, that's at least $4 or more, but now it's like, no, that's $3. So it made it feel even more accessible to spend money there on food and other things and gifts. But I did the opposite of when we were there. When we were there, I always thought of everything as even or more in 1994, but now I looked at everything and immediately just took 25% off the yen, rounded off when I looked at it. So it was, relatively speaking, more affordable this trip than in 1994, including good food. Like, it could be extremely expensive when you bought meat and things back then. It seemed less expensive.
So I want to hear about your perspective. 1994 and 2023, it's almost 30 years difference. So did you notice any changes in Japan over that period of time?
Oh, yes. I mean, in 1994, I felt like I was the only blonde person in the whole country. But then this time when I got there, I felt like There were people from all nations, all the continents, really. I mean, you'd hear, snippets of different conversations everywhere. So people from Brazil, from China, from, Australia and whatnot. And, all touring. It just really felt like Japan had reopened when we arrived.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a big difference. Not, obviously COVID had an impact in the sense that it was reopened, but it was obvious, one, that there were, foreigners and tourists were not unusual anymore. And so in 1994, really the only people I knew of in Japan, or we knew of, had been there for business or were expats living there. Everyone we saw when we were there in 1994, who other than like a couple of German tourists, we always joked with you about that and told other people, like we were at temples where the only other Caucasians that we saw were these German tourists.
And it was the same group of German tourists.
But it was a big difference. That was not just, now that there were tourists because it was post-COVID, there were more tourists and it wasn't unusual. That's what I said. So people didn't see it as unusual. Back then, no one we knew visited Japan. Now we have tons of friends talking about taking trips. And as you know, friends that have been there since we've been there. So it's a big difference. People are actively, right now, we have a number of friends, in part because not only us talking about it or you tour there, but generally it seems a lot of people are very interested right now in Japan. Maybe the fact that the Olympics did COVID, oddly enough, Japan was in the news a lot because it was inaccessible, and had the Olympics, no one could go. So people were very aware that Japan was closed for quite a while to the outside. And then that, it was one of the last, countries that you think of as one of the modern travel to countries that really hadn't opened yet. So I think it's weird, but there's tons of people that we know talking about visiting Japan. So that tourism is a big difference. So that just didn't go on, back then when we visited. And that was a very significant difference.
And the other is food available. For example, years ago when we went in 94, maybe we saw a Haagen-Dazs, but then we didn't see other nationalities of food. But now I see that things like, Italian food is popular, Korean barbecue, whatnot. I mean, Indian. We didn't see that at all.
More influence of international foods was noticeable. Also, like maybe I would describe as more informal food places than there used to be in 1994. I don't know the right way to describe that, but I think it was easier to just pop in somewhere this time and get stuff.
Convenience, right? I think there were more convenience now than years ago because it wasn't such a factor years ago. There probably were some, but I remember more vending machines. And now, and I miss them. I really enjoyed going into convenience and all types of things between juices.
Okay, we're going to talk more about like our feelings during the trip. So what were your feelings of being kind of led around by your daughter this time in Japan? So now I've been here about 4 years. So how did it feel like being in Japan with me and seeing my Japan?
Well, I remember just told our friend that had visited that it's like having a translator with you. I didn't need a little Japanese English dictionary, or I didn't even pick up Google Translate because I would defer to you, Marielle, and you're able to either order or point out different things that I wouldn't maybe be aware of. So we definitely relied on you in that respect.
Yeah, it was nice that you also. It was nice to see that you had learned so much about Japan. Like it wasn't just that you were able to converse, a lot about different areas. You were very, very. You had been there you've been there 4 years now. So, a ton of experience that made it even more relaxed because you. Not only do we have our ideas of what we should see, but you had all these ideas and experiences and places you thought we should see, and that we went to, and so that made it even more fun and more relaxed. And also that the only other thing to say is also that you knew people. Like, we had dinner with your friends. Right. We, the original interview for Samurai Flag, in part also. So, just all came down to that. And that was very interesting and made the trip more interesting and exciting.
Yeah, you had done planning on your own, for example, at that wonderful day where we had the boat trip. And you were like, you had seen the boat, and you made the reservation, and then we did it, and then we had the wonderful dinner, like I said, in Asakusa. But even things like I had mentioned maybe going north, and you knew about Matsushima Bay and about the poetry that came from there. And I'm so glad that we made a point of going up to the coast, because that was another beautiful highlight. And then I tip my hat to you. I think that's a lot. You had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. So I just want to say like how I felt during this time. I really like this time, them coming to Japan and me being so comfortable in Japan, knowing so many people. I felt proud to share with them the people I've met, the places I know about, the information I have. Also, even though sometimes I felt pressure when the menu was really difficult, up in Sendai there was one was kind of confusing, but I felt also proud of myself that I could translate things and that they didn't have to rely on Google Translate. So I was just so happy with the trip, and people seem to love it on YouTube, like all of us together. So I thought like, oh, it would be so great for them to come again and do more things together. So if you were to come to Japan again, what would you want to do?
I'll say a few things. I mean, you had just gone to Okinawa. That would be one area that I would be interested in seeing, especially learning about, especially it's very popular here now. I think there's a book called Ikigai about, living a long, fulfilling life. And I believe they call it a blue zone in Okinawa, where people live to be centenarians. And I'm kind of curious about that. I think that's one thing I'd like to explore more. And also I'm very interested about, I guess, the Tokaido Road, like the Samurai Road, that whole central part country and all the villages along the way there.
Dad, how about you?
I would like to just go further to other areas that are one of the things that seemed interesting is we traveled areas that people, like you said, were surprised we traveled to, like Kokunodate, Sendai. Like I would like to travel to other areas that, again, one of the interesting things about the trip in 1994 was that no one we knew had really done what we were doing. And, it was very interesting because we weren't seeing it through other people's eyes as much, and it was new and fresh, and that was exciting, and it was a different culture, and that was very exciting. And so, and a culture that wasn't, I should say, really, it was still, and it still is very much Japanese, not affected so much and changed by the world. And it's nice to be someplace that's what you want to visit, not like going to visit the same place you'd see elsewhere. But then I would like to go also maybe to the coast that's on the northern Japanese coast, because I don't think I've really been there, and see some of the areas. Also, maybe also more like breweries or things, Sapporo or other places that are there, and things like that. Distilleries in Scotland and stuff. Like I would like to go to, because Japan makes such great whiskey. I have Japanese whiskey here. It's one of the few places that does make great whiskey, and I would love to visit some of the distilleries. So I would even love to go back and just do stuff like that. Yeah, like we said, if we could have stayed a couple more weeks, looking back, it would have been great.
Yeah, we definitely, like when we were on that last day of the trip, we were all saying like how we wished we had more time. So even though we appreciated the time we had, of course, like there was always so much more to do. But I'm really, really grateful. I know many people in Japan whose family has never come to visit, whose family maybe can't make the trip. So I'm just so grateful that not only did you inspire me to come here, but you supported me all the way through, and then also just like make the time and effort to come experience it with me. So thank you so much. ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
Okay, so we're going to finish up now. Please subscribe to Samurai Flag channel, and if you haven't seen the original video, it's at over 1 million views, but we had a dinner all together when they returned to Japan in Asakusa. So
it's almost 1.4 million.
Yes.
my dad's always checking.
Wow.
Yeah, So yeah, we're really proud of that. And I have my own channel, which is On the World Stage. And you can see the videos of us in Kokunodate and Matsushima Bay, Sendai. So only 2 videos. I wish we took more. Only 2 videos, but those are the best locations. Thank you so much for your time today. We have big time difference, so it's nighttime for them, daytime for me. Thank you so much for your time. If you're watching, see you next time. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.